So here we are in the Renaissance. We have moved out of the Middle Ages and into Enlightenment. And now we have all of this amazing art and literature. We're taking these amazing leap forwards when it comes to science. The human body is back in art and accurately depicted. So there are some artistic developments we have to talk about first that changed the art world dramatically. The first is oil on stretched canvas. This allowed artists to have a greater range of colors. We have smoother gradations. It really propels the forward artists wanting to imply three-dimensional form on a flat surface. To back up a little bit, all of the other art that we have looked at has mostly been tempera-based, which is an egg-based paint, and it's been on wood panels or perhaps on walls. So a much narrower range is available with those media. And so the second breakthrough that we had was the idea of linear perspective. So we know if we look out a window or we're in a city, that if we see out into the distance, things get smaller and slightly fuzzier as they move away from us. Well, this is now coming into play in art. The proportion of objects relative to where the viewer is standing in space is important. And we can see that depicted here in the School of Athens by Raphael. So the overlaid teal lines show us that this is a one-point perspective drawing, painting. Each one of those lines shows an architectural detail that kind of leads our eyes back to that single point in between the two painted figures at the center. Chiaroscuro is the third artistic breakthrough that we're talking about here. This is the use of light and shadow to create those three-dimensional forms on a flat surface, and most often chiaroscuro is associated with these illuminated, glowing figures that seem to emerge from these dark areas. The last one is the idea of pyramid configuration. Now, we talked recently about movement in art and how our eye travels throughout a piece. In pyramid configuration, at the apex of the pyramid, we have the most important thing that we should be looking at. And in this one, we have the face of Venus. She's at the peak of the pyramid, and then we can see her our gaze kind of travels to the right to the woman with a large cloak, down her arm, back across to the left side of the painting to the two angels that are standing there, and then back up to Venus's face. So our eyes just kind of ping pong around in that triangular pattern. The first artist we're going to talk about is Donatello, and Donatello brings back the idea of contrapposto. He wasn't the only one, but he's the one we're going to talk about. His work was very realistic. He wanted to focus on the underlying structure that we saw in human forms, while sometimes still presenting an idealized form, especially here in David by Donatello. On this one, we can see the right leg is bearing all of the weight with that idea of contrapposto. The left leg is bent at the knee. The hips are sort of splayed to the right side. The right shoulder is a little lower. The left shoulder is a little higher. It's a very relaxed, natural sculpture, especially in comparison to what we were seeing in the Byzantine and Romanesque periods. And here we have his sculpture of Mary Magdalene, and this one in particular has a roughness to it, and part of this is due to the biblical story of Mary Magdalene. He wanted to show her penitence. He wanted to show how she had changed her life and committed herself to the Word of God after her previous incarnation in the Bible. Now we have Botticelli, and Botticelli has this beautiful, lush style. He was really, really well known for his paintings of mythical figures. So here we have Venus and Mars lounging in a very opulent sort of scene. And then we have some satyrs in the background. Botticelli also did create some religious work, but I think he's more well known for his mythological figures here. And we're going to keep moving very quickly. Again, high points of the movement here. Let's talk about Raphael. Raphael is often can be considered the ultimate in Renaissance style. He had a lot of chiaroscuro, a lot of pyramid configuration. He had these very lush, full-bodied figures and contrapposto in his works. So here we can absolutely see Jesus at the apex of the pyramid, and then on either side of him, those two figures are making up the sides of the pyramid and pulling our eyes down to these masses at the bottom that appear to be emerging from the darkness. So there's that idea of chiaroscuro. And if you take a look at the bodies themselves, they're very full and lush and rich and accurately depicted. They look wonderful and realistic. Here we have Madonna in the meadow. Again, Madonna's face is at the peak, and then our eyes travel down her body, which is kind of set up in that triangular pattern to look at the other aspects. The next artist we're going to talk about is the rock star of the early Renaissance, and that is Teishen. Teishen is credited with being the person who pushed the idea of oil on canvas. He painted everything: landscapes, religious scenes, portraits, mythological stuff. So we're going to look at one of his mythological pieces here. This is the Bacchanal of the Adrians. And when we look at this, we can see all of the things that have become important. We see a great range of color due to his use of oil paints. We can see this sort of mythological scene breaking down in front of us. We see full, accurately depicted bodies. The proportions are correct. You can see that there is perspective. If you look in the back, you can see that there appears to be a body of water and then perhaps a mountain in the back. So there's a whole lot of those elements coming together in Teishen's work. And then we have sacred and profane love. Now, this is a very horizontal sort of composition, but we do still have this beautiful, full, composition that is complete with lovely fabrics and skin tones and, accurately depicted bodies that are proportioned, and the idea of perspective here. You can see in the background, those buildings look accurately portrayed because they're smaller, because they're further away. I always like, if I have an opportunity to show you guys the pieces up close that, or not up close, with people in them, that you can get a sense of scale. Scale is really important when we're talking about art. And I can give you measurements for all of the pieces, but unfortunately, sometimes those measurements in our head appear abstract. So I always like to try to include a picture. This is from an Italian Renaissance exhibit. It was a traveling exhibit when I was in Edinburgh, Scotland. And you can see the massive size of some of these pieces. They're absolutely huge, bigger than life size. So it is really important to understand that sometimes the work we are looking at can be really, really large, as is the case with a lot of the Renaissance work. And then just one more that I got to see because it was by Teishen, and I just love this piece. Again, we have a very pyramid sort of configuration happening here with Mary at the center, and then the unidentified saints on either side, creating a very wide pyramid in this case. Beautiful, full, I keep using the word lush because that's the best way to describe these bodies. Just accurately depicting the human form in a way that we had really gotten away from during the Middle Ages. Remember, the Middle Ages was all about the body being corrupt and a vessel for sin. And now we're celebrating the human form again, which is so wonderful. let's talk about Northern Renaissance because we've really been focusing on Italy at this point, and we kind of have to keep going because the Renaissance didn't just happen in Italy, it happened all over. So, in the northern part of the Renaissance artistic movement, we see a hyper focus on detail. Every single thing they wanted to render accurately in their paintings. These were not the people that you wanted to see or have paint your portrait if you were having a set of blemishes on your face or if you were not in your peak physical performance, because they were going to portray it accurately. So the first artist who was known for his extreme microscopic detail is Jan van Eyck, and he portrays his people in a very dignified manner, but he also doesn't mask their imperfections. And so this is the Errol Feeney Wedding by Van Eyck. And when we look at this piece, especially when we're looking at the entire piece as we are here, we are like, okay, there's a lot of detail. It looks really nice, but how is that more detail than what we have seen in some of the other works? Well, as we start to zoom in on aspects of this painting, we are going to be seeing those incredible amount of detail. We can see not only the detail that's included in their face, but if we start to take a look at the background, really focus on the background, we see a lot happening here. We see an incredibly elaborate, detailed chandelier that's hosting a single candle. We can see a lovely set of golden glass beads hanging on the wall with green tassels. We can tell that there is some sort of writing on the wall. We can see the mirror, that central mirror in the back. We see what looks like some sort of like broom hanging from some sort of bedpost. Just let's zoom in just even more and you can see. And the really cool thing about the Errol Feeney Wedding is that he had such an attention to detail that if we look in the mirror, we're seeing the room reflected. So we're seeing the back of the bride and the groom. We're seeing the window, and you can tell that there's a curve. You can even see that beautiful chandelier that has been painted like in the top center of that mirror. And then if you can see that small splash of blue, bright blue right there in the center of the mirror, that's actually Van Eyck. He painted himself painting them. It's so meta and so fantastic that you cannot not love it. Like, I just absolutely am obsessed with it. And I just wanted to zoom in just a little bit more on this painting or in the chandelier so that you could see the detailing in the chandelier, like the diamond pieces that are kind of hanging off as decorative notes have some sort of engraving on them. So I mean, this is such an amazing hyper detailed painting that it just blows my mind. Every time I look at it, I see something new. Like now I'm seeing the bedpost in the back right here underneath the chandelier and noticing that it has some sort of religious figure, and I'm gonna bet it's Mary because, Mary is still a hot topic in the art world, but it looks fantastic. The last artist we're going to talk about is El Greco. Now, we're switching to Spain. We're moving out of Northern Europe. We're going over to Spain, and Spain is in the grips of a religious frenzy. Catholicism has taken hold hardcore in Spain, and it really has deeply influenced the art in a way that is even more intense than what we've previously looked at. And El Greco became very popular in Spain during this time. And he stretched and elongated his figures in order to increase the intensity, the emotional intensity in his paintings. And he does have this idea of chiaroscuro, but it's very eerie almost. So let's take a look here at the Adoration of the Shepherds by El Greco. And in this, you can see the idea of chiaroscuro happening. It's very haunting though. It almost feels Halloweenish to our modern eyes. All of the illumination is coming from the infant Christ child at the center of this painting, and therefore it illuminates all the other figures around it. And you can see that the forms of the figures themselves are very long and stretched out.